All right. Thanks everybody for joining us for session 2 of our DEI virtual CTW series. And Dana, take it away, my friend.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Again, for those who are seeing me for the first time, my name is Dana Smith. I am very happy, excited to be with your group today. I am a cultural proficiency consultant. I bring almost 3 decades of experience to engaging in interactions regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion to schools, organizations, businesses, nonprofits, private organizations, you name it. I've pretty much facilitated a conversation there. I'm really happy to be with all of you today. Now, last time, which was our first session, we had a few agreements. I'd rarely start them the second time, but a couple of things I would ask of everyone is one, that you participate to the degree that you're able to, that you show yourself if at all possible. I know for some people, based on where you are in your home or in the space you're in, that's not possible. But if it's doable, we'd like you to actually use the video. And oftentimes during this session, we'll also use the communication. So if you'll unmute yourself and respond to some things, always keep in mind that the collective knowledge of the entire group is much greater than what I could ever bring to the party or the conversation. So I ask those things because we need you, and we'll be accessing chat from time to time to respond to a couple of questions I may have or any questions that you might have, okay? All right, so just a little recap. If there's not any questions, I have my chat up. So if you have a question, you can stop me at any time, ask a question, raise a hand, and I'll respond, okay? Just a brief overview of a few things that we discussed last time. It was our first session together. So other than just having those agreements that I talked about, we talked about things like microaggressions, prejudice, discrimination, bias, explicit and implicit bias. Those are some of the topics that come up that it's important that we lay the groundwork so that we can have a productive conversation around these issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. As you might well imagine, those conversations can become very contentious. They can also be very uplifting depending on how they're managed in the reactions and the interactions between the group. So the better understanding we have of the terminology, what it means, its impact and its effects, not only intellectually, but emotionally, the more effective our conversations will be. So I'm glad everyone who was here last time made it back. Welcome to all the new faces. I have a video presentation that I'm going to share, but before I do that, I just would like you, one and all, to put any topic involving diversity, equity, and inclusion that has been in the media lately. And when I say lately, we could be talking the last 6 months, that has either piqued your interest or caught your attention. That does not mean you did or did not get involved, that you sent $1, a dime, or $1 million to some organization. It just means I saw that story, heard that story, and somehow it resonated with me under the umbrella of diversity, equity, and inclusion, okay? So would you please in the chat, just in the chat, would you put in what that topic may have been around diversity, equity, and inclusion in the media in the last 6 months or so that piqued your interest? Thank you for being here. Someone's telling me they didn't have the microphone. Thanks for letting us know. You're still here, and we'll treat you fairly. Okay. Wired about lack of diversity. Thank you for that one. Wired Nag, yes, yes, yes. I see it. Yeah, thank you, Holly. Someone else, please. I just have one. I hope someone else has had an issue around diversity, equity in the last 6 months that it at least caught your attention. Just have one so far. Anyone else? There's another one we have, just healthcare or lack. Mhm. Approaches to teaching you. Oh, yes, yes, yes. Oh, my mind. Much of my work has been very negatively affected as a result of this narrative about this whole critical race theory and what it might or may not do and what it is or is not. Wall Street Journal on the increases in diversity of boards. I saw that article. It's very well written. Not nearly as much progress as we thought we would have at this point, but some people are still working on it. Transgender in athletics. There is a Paralympic athlete who refused to go to the Olympics in Tokyo because the Olympic Commission would not allow her to take her assistant. She can't get around. She can't make it to the meet. She can't do anything. It's almost like having a visually challenged person, some people still say blind, not be able to take their guide dog with them somewhere. That's what she likened it to. They told her she can't come, can't bring the assistant, can't come. Oh, I published an article that completely, oh, wonderful. Yeah, Eugene, wow. I'd love you to email me a copy of that article, lack of female and Black coaches in a journal of sport and social issues. Thank you for that. For soccer and the current events, you know, England and Italy were playing for the cup in the soccer, and the English players of color missed some of the penalty kick, hence they lost the game. They were bombarded with racial tropes, racist, all kind of commentary online. So much for so that the England first family finally spoke out about it. It was really blatant. If you didn't see it, you should pull it up. Oh, I not. Let me read this one. Not a true DEI topic issue, but I discussed a discussion with my tennis community about the treatment of Federer versus the treatment of Osaka about the French Open. I think that definitely does fall under the umbrella of diversity, equity, and inclusion. As a matter of fact, I have a chat group that's national where we were knocking around how might the treatment been toward Osaka in her confession of having depression issues be different, were she one of the outstanding white female tennis champions? So absolutely, because I mean, they came down on her hard, whether you agree or disagree. She got back smacked in a major kind of way, and she was basically asking for help. But yeah, thank you for having such a conversation, because it enters into our tennis world. That's why we're here too. There's no place where diversity and equity and inclusion does not enter, because it comes with us. It's inside of us. It's who we are. It's how we identify. It's how we engage. It's who we accept and who we reject, who we choose to befriend and who we just don't like, just based on vision alone. Anybody else have a different one? Anybody else? Anything else in the media that you've seen, heard? I put the one in about the indigenous peoples. There has been two so far mass burial grounds found at Catholic-based boarding schools where indigenous people's children were taken and forced to go to school, and they were actually killing them. No other way to put it around. No. And now they found one here in the United States. I think it was in South Dakota. Same type of arrangement, indigenous people, some people still say Native American. So whatever the term is for you, or whatever the preferred term, when they were forced to go to these schools, many of them were being killed, and they were just throwing them in the backyard and covering them up with dirt. Yeah. Anybody else going once? Going twice? Thank you. Thank you. I asked that kind of opening salvo because I like us to get a feel how nationwide this entire issue of diversity, inclusion, and equity is. It touches all of us in some form or fashion, whether again we choose to get involved, not to get involved, cover our ears and our eyes, regardless. It's there. And it's there in a major kind of way, and it makes a difference. It makes a difference how people feel. It makes a difference how people are treated. It makes a difference in terms of people being regarded, whether or not they're actually American or not. So thank you. Thank you for that. I am going to share, if there's no questions or anything, I'm going to share a few slides with us, okay? All right, let me go on here and share my screen. Okay, can everybody see my screen now?
Yes, we can see
Can
it.
you see?
Well, I can see it. Mhm.
Okay. I'm gonna try to take those slide. Okay. All right. Okay. As you see my first slide, the diversity, equity, inclusion, part 2, and that's a let's play. I picked this particular slide to emphasize the difference even in tennis balls. Sometimes they're not all the same. Some of them are hit a little bit more, some of them are hit a little bit less, some of them are made softer, some of them are made harder. So there's even diversity in the tools that we use in this game called tennis. Some of the things, as I referred to, that we talked to last time were bias, microaggressions, prejudice, stereotypes, and discrimination. Now, bias has two forms. For those of you who were here and those of you who got a chance to watch the video of our first session, you notice I used a video called Peanut Butter, Jelly, and Racism. And bias is the association that we make with people, places, and things. Sometimes our associations are from experiences. Other times our associations are based on things that we've heard, we've seen in the media, or that we've been taught in terms of our upbringing, in our background. I've done an incredible a lot of work in our schools with our youth, and many, many times the organization or as an individual that I represent going in to do an intervention after something egregious has happened in terms of someone being offended by a person toward their particular marginalized group. Parents are called in to the administrator's office and eyes are wide and surprised and wow, that never taught that at home, never learned that at home. And oftentimes as a consultant, I'm encouraged to ask the follow-up question, and then what do you talk about if you've not had that conversation around diversity and equity? What is the conversation? That's not it. So when we don't have these conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion, how it impacts us, we leave ourselves open to an entire onslaught of information that enforces, reinforces, and creates brand new biases toward groups of people. I'm originally Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania resident, and I sometimes shared a brief story when I moved from Pittsburgh to Connecticut to live with an aunt of mine for a short time after college, and how she was so deeply imbued with Puerto Rican discrimination. We went for a ride in a couple of communities, and she would point out if the car had more than 4 people in it, they must be Puerto Rican. If the house was a light blue or a shiny green, those are Puerto Ricans. If it was a rundown community. So I was infected, and I do use the word infected properly, with Puerto Rican bias in a very short period of time. Coming from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, we knew not what a Puerto Rican person was, looked like, talked like, ate, or anything else. So I know it can happen quickly, and it happens to us in a very fast fashion as well. Microaggressions, as you know, are those things that are said toward people sometimes intended to be a put up that actually come off as a put down. Prejudice is prejudging a person based on how they look, how they talk, what they eat, who they love, you name it. And stereotypes are these issues and images that we find coming up time and time again as it relates to a person in terms of what they may do, what they may not do, in terms of who they are as a person on this planet. And last but not least is discrimination. That's an actual act toward another individual or group of people that typically is harmful, although discrimination can sometimes have positive effects, believe it or not. Okay. I talked about a few of those current events, and I'm glad you brought up some of them because I talked about the athlete. You brought up critical race theory. There's a lot of voter suppression going on. These are not politicized statements, by the way. These are actual issues that belong under diversity and equity and inclusion umbrella. There is a high school student was just arrested last week for making an anti-Semitic attack on a yearbook to put some Hitler quotes that were other quotes, and he put them in the book, and they got printed, and they found out it was him, and he was just arrested. There was a Asian American male right here in Georgia who was attacked over at Lindbergh Station, who still remains in a coma today. It happened about 8 days ago. I talked about the indigenous people's graves and also the racist cyber attacks on the soccer players in England. So just some of the current events. And you brought up critical race theory already, as I said, that's really making its rounds here. If we're not talking about race in our history, I don't know what we are talking about, because it definitely should be a major theme. However it's presented, it should be included. Any questions, any comments at all on any of those topics in the media? Anything you want to delve deeper into, anyone? Okay.
From here, I can't think.
I'm sorry, someone's talking. Who was that? I heard someone say, did someone have something to say? No,
Maybe it was just an interruption, I suppose.
it's an interruption. Thank you, Lil.
That won't help.
Okay,
I have a question.
yes. And who is I?
This is Holly.
Okay, Holly,
and,
I see you now.
I wonder if sometimes we don't, I don't know who makes these, calls these things. I know critical race theory is an actual academic description that's been used for a long time. But things like defund the police, critical race theory that have these effects on people seemingly,
Yeah.
I feel like sometimes they could come up with something that's not quite as divisive in a way, like defund the police.
Yeah, they can.
You know, that this is a very unfortunate term for trying to divert resources in a better way, I feel, but it's become very divisive. So I wonder sometimes if we can't think about better ways to describe the efforts to make more equity.
I think we can. I think we can, and that's a point very well taken, Holly. When we mention something like defunding the police, you got to think defunding means someone's being put out of work, right? That means they're not be able to take care of their family. That means you no longer have the protection and the service that are supposed to be provided to the entire community by law enforcement if you defund it, if you take it away. So it's a very, very volatile term that could be couched in another way, in a way that still allows us to have the conversation and to create the change that's required to make sure all communities are created equitably. Because that can happen. And it happens in other places with nearly as much diversity in our population as the United States. I say nearly because there is no other place in the United States that has as much cultural diversity as the United States. So we're number one on that. But like places like England, there's some parts of their communities where police officers don't carry guns. They don't carry guns. Unless it's a volatile incident, they call for a unit that is armed to come, but they just walk around with the radios and the cameras and the flashlights and address all kinds of issues. Issues where now we're finally having a conversation where when there is a psychological issue of concern, instead of dispatching police, they dispatch social workers that are trained in de-escalating situations. See, that'll make things a lot better. But I hear you when you say defund police and things like that, that can really stir up some things unnecessarily. So thank you for that point, Holly. I appreciate that. Anyone else? Going once, going twice, gone. Okay, who are you? Okay, who are you? Now, we are going to imagine that we were at some public place somewhere, I don't care where it is, you pick it, and someone approached you in intentionally a non-offensive way and asked you this question, who are you? Now, what I want you to do quickly in the chat, and I want to hear from everybody, how would you respond to that request from this stranger, but not giving your name? I don't want you to tell them your name. So how might you respond real quickly in the chat? Would you write some things down? How would you respond? How would you respond? I'm going to ask you, came up to you somewhere in a public space and said, who are you? How would you respond? Again, minus your name. I don't want you to tell them your name. I see someone, she's putting something against Harriet, you're putting something against the camera, but I can't quite see it. Okay. Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. I work for Aflac. Okay. All right. Born, raised Michigan. All right. Okay. A strong woman, wife, and lover of people. Hello. College student, oldest sister, 6 children, tennis player. There we go. There we go. Attorney, teacher, eternal optimist. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Mom, I'm just a girl in the world. Mom, a Christian. Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. And again, even someone approaching you, I imagine how that could be off-putting. I open up this particular part of our conversation because we're about to delve into the issue, the importance of identity. The importance of identity. Who are you? What are your values? What do you believe? Will you change the world or will the world change you? It all starts with that thing called identity. We all have a name. As a matter of fact, our names are the first gift right after life that we were given, okay? So, do you know who you're named after? Anybody? You know who you're named after?
My mom said she named me after Caroline Kennedy.
Oh, wow. Here, here. Thank you, Carolyn. Anyone else? Do you know who your namesake was? And please, thank you for unmuting. Who are you named after?
I'm sorry, I'm named after both my grandmothers.
Both of your grandmothers. Wonderful.
I'm named after my mother.
my mother's twin sister.
Mother's twin sister. Is anyone named after a deceased relative? Okay.
They're deceased now, but they weren't when I was born.
Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. My name comes from a movie star, now deceased, named Dana Andrews. That's where my mother got my name from. You know, you get, you know, particular kind of funny ha-has when name comes up and people assume that you're one thing when you're not, as in male or female. So I've dealt with that the entire course of my life. I have a magazine that I subscribe to that I pay annually. At the beginning of the year, my name changed from Mr. Dana Smith back to MS Dana Smith. And it's happened for the last 10 years in a row. And after the 8th letter, I kind of got tired and gave up. So the magazine and the information is still important enough to me. So I still keep that, okay? All right. I am trying to get my slide to advance here. All right. So what's in a name? What's in a name? Anybody? What's captured in your name? Will someone unmute yourself and respond to that question, please? What's in your name?
Sometimes it's heritage,
Heritage.
ethnic background. It could be your country of origin.
Yes.
I mean, I can speak for myself, and I know that when people see my name, they automatically assume that it's an African American. and they can't pronounce it. It's impronounceable.
Yes, yes. How do you pronounce your name?
Shaquetta. But
Shaquetta.
when I was growing up, I frequently got Chiquita Banana.
Oh,
The whole time I was growing up. It got mispronounced the very first day of school, every school year, and it was just constant from that point forward.
wow, wow. Thank you for that. Anyone else in terms of what's encapsulated in a person's name?
Well, a name is a unique identifier and it is how you get your paycheck.
Yes, sure is. And a few other choice pieces of mail. Is that Katrina, right? Yes, absolutely. Yes, yes, it sure is. And there's history, there's pride, all of that wrapped up in a name. I once upon a time worked with a young lady she was 17, a senior in high school, and I was consulting with a group to help them become more aware of the role of philanthropy. A gentleman donated $250,000 of his own dollars and picked a hand group of diverse individuals, high school age, from about 12 different high schools. So it was about a group of 30 or so. And this young lady's name was Sugiharajin. Sugiharajin. I still can pronounce her name because when we had this thing, which is called the name game and the importance of people's names, that we started our conversation with, she began to cry. When we went around the room for the first time, she said, "My name is Sue." And I had to ask, I'm facilitating, you can't sit in there and cry and not let me know why. I may have done something that I'm ready to apologize for. But she said it's the first time in her entire high school, from the grade she was in third grade, that she's actually shared her name with a group of mixed people. When she was in second grade and introduced herself as Sugiharajin, the teacher said, "I'll call you Sue." And she was Sue from that time until this moment of nearly her 18th birthday. And it was just overwhelming in terms of, she said, how much she lost and not being called by the name that she was gifted, that had all that heritage, that pride, and that culture associated with. But naming is a big part of who we are. Part of it is in our name, and other parts are in other identifiers. And we want to talk a little bit about that thing called identity. Identity is an incredibly critical part of this whole diversity, equity, and inclusion conversation. Many of our parts of our identities we are born with, never to change. Some of them change and evolve over time. We always have a physical identity, even though that stamp too in and of itself can change, but we always have a physical identity. When I show up, this is most likely who you see. Now, how you relate to who you see, how you couch what you see, is different for different people. Some of that can be very positive, some of it can be incredibly stereotypical, some of it can cost you your life based on how someone else views you in terms of your identity. Some of it can keep you safe, some of it can cause you a lot of harm, not based on anything that you may or may not be doing, just based on your identity, what you're putting forth in the world. I selectively put this particular graphic with puzzle pieces because our identity are like puzzles. There's a lot of elements to it. Many of those elements you covered when you responded to that question of that person approaching you and asking who you are. I heard mother, I heard teacher, I heard lawyer, I heard I'm just a girl in a world, I heard I am eternal optimist, just in case you wanted to know whether or not I was reading responses, by the way. But I heard all of that, and that's all of who we are. But sometimes a lot of those identifiers are masked by the overwhelming countenance of these things called stereotypes. I can't see you because of what I see about you. So I can never get there. This is what you represent to me, and that's it. In order to crack that shield, we've got to create relationships. And I talked about it a little bit last time. Those relationships must come via a conversation, the exchange of information. And I don't mean just talking about everything that's nothing, but I'm talking about some things that are something, things that could potentially impact you based on the image that you bring to the party, how you're treated, whether you're hired or fired, whether you're going to be offered a mortgage that is fair, whether you're stopped for no reason by law enforcement, whether you are allowed to love the person you love without being attacked. These are all parts of our identity that's a part of this entire community in which we serve, work, live in, okay? So let's identify ourselves. I want you to identify yourself. If you have a piece of paper handy, it would be nice. I should have mentioned this before, but you can hold these things in your mind too if you don't have a piece of paper. I want you to identify yourself based on your age, your race, your religion, and your gender, okay? Please write down those 4 identifiers for yourself on a piece of paper there. And no, I am not going to ask anybody to divulge their age. So be comfortable, just write it on your piece of paper. I know that can come up with a certain amount of sensibilities for particular members of our society. Age, race, religion, and gender. Okay. Just those 4 attributes of your identifier: how old you are, your race, your religion, and your gender. Now, we only have 55 minutes together, so you can imagine these identifiers could have stretched the length of this room, your room, and this house, and this county, and I never repeat the same identifier twice. But for sake of clarity and the teachable moment that I'm trying to bring about, I just focus on these 4. Not intending to slight any other aspects of identity. All those other identities are very important. We just going to focus on these. So age. Are you in the age group that has the most power and respect in the continental United States? Now, I guess you would say, Dana, well, what age group is that in? So I'm going to give you 3 age groups. I'm going to give you the age group of teenagers. Okay, so I'm going to say 13 to 18. And then I'm going to call young adults 21 to 30. I'm going to call middle age 40 to 50. Yeah, let's make it 40 to 50. And I'm going to make senior citizens 51 and above. So which arena, age range has the most respect and the most power? If they want something done, you can rest assured they have the age coalition to make that happen. Which age group is that in? Somebody unmute yourself and tell me what age group you believe that to be in the United States of America. Which age? I'm sorry, a little louder. Who was that?
The old folks, seniors.
No. Be kind now. Michael's old.
51 and above.
1 and above.
What, 55 and above? Okay. Okay. Anybody think that's teenagers? Anybody think teenagers pushing the kind of power? Okay. 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 What about the middle-aged group folks? No, anybody, nobody believes they're okay. Okay. All right. It's not a debate. Whatever you believe it is, and your experience probably tells you that to be true. Those are the peaceful, peace and most power. If we come together at that senior citizen age and say we need a new stoplight out here, guess what? That stoplight showing up in about 2 weeks. Okay, we get ready to make that happen. We can make some change happen. Now, what about race? Race. Now, for race, for clarity, I'm going to make 3 groups. And again, this is for clarity, okay? I don't mean them mixed race or different other ethnicities, cultures, and races in kind. For the sake of clarity, I'm going to say you're going to be white or non-white, okay? White or non-white, okay? Again, that's clarity. Which group has the most power in this continental United States? Someone unmute yourself and tell me what that opinion is on your part.
White.
White. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Anybody have anything different than that? Because sometimes we have people that have experiences, they say, well, that's not mine. Okay. Now, what about religion? Again, for sake of clarity and cost of the time, and I wish I had 2 days and I'm working on Michael, trust me, I am. Religion is going to be Christian or non-Christian. And you know how wide that plethora of non-Christian religions are. Talk about long. And sometimes we leave a lot of them out. But for sake of clarity, we're going to say you're Christian or you're not. And you already know what my next question is going to be. At least I hope you do. And that is, which one has the most power in the United States of America? The Christian religion, or there's a other than Christian religion?
Christian.
Christian religion. And last but not least, gender. And this likewise gets a little ticklish from the standpoint of the variations that we could have when we're talking sexual expression, gender expression, non-binary, et cetera, et cetera. I do not intend to give short shrift to anyone's orientation, background, binary or non-binary affiliation. This is a clarity kind of a thing. If I was doing my on the ground workshop and we really had a day, we would get into all aspects of that identity. But I'm just going to, for the sake of clarity, is going to say male or female. Male or female. Which one has the most power in the United States? Someone unmute yourself and answer that for us.
Males.
Male. Still today.
Females.
She says females.
Females.
Males. Okay.
No,
okay.
females.
You said females. Okay.
Females.
Okay. All right. Like I say, you're always going to have opinions more than one.
I never have to wait for my female players on my mixed team to ask their husbands if they can play that night.
I got that. The power dynamic can be different, but in the bigger scheme of things, you really have to question yourself who's really pushing the power. One of the things that's incredibly disturbing, and Julio, I don't know if this has ever come up in the girls group that you're consulting with, is the pay inequity between men and women still yet in our corporations, where women are still making 80 cents to the dollar that the man makes for the same job with the same responsibilities. And those are white women. That number de-escalates when you talk about brown and black women. It's less than that, but it's still there. And it's still rooted in our culture in a way that it's not being addressed to make it go away. So gender, one has more power than the other. One's highly regarded. One's still even better paid.
That's actually not true. If you look at
What's
the
that?
economic literature.
What's actually not true? Who am I speaking with?
This is Dave.
Dave, go ahead, talk to us, Dave.
So I've got a degree in economics, and if you look at the economic literature, women are not paid less than men when you account for things like time in the workforce, hours worked. Hours worked is actually the biggest one, and just pay of general jobs.
Okay. So when you factor in other things that is impacting the bottom line on that paycheck, and that disparity, you're saying that the pay equity is on an equal footing.
Sorry.
Yes.
That's what I hear you saying?
Yes, and actually for women under the age of 40, they actually make slightly more than men under the age of 40 when you factor in those criteria.
Okay. I accept that. It's that we have different opinions. I am still of the mind, however, when you come home with a paycheck after you've gone and did a particular job and the same functions in that job, there should be more equity in the actual paycheck. But I could not rule out what you're factoring in terms of other extraneous issues that might contribute to how long you can stay at the job versus how long I can stay at the job and things of that nature, because that can make a difference. All right. But it's still, the baseline is there is seriously pay inequity when it comes to gender in our corporations. Thank you for that. And I really appreciate you using your voice This is what I'm talking about, the conversation that needs to be had amongst us because of the other issues and circumstances that someone else might bring to the party that merits additional discussion. Okay? Now, I just
I'm
talked
sorry.
about.
I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead.
Can I say something?
Yes, you sure can. Who was I? Who am I?
This is Tina Jones.
Okay.
One of a lot of the problem with the pay inequity is the culture of secrecy over salaries. It's a huge thing in company. You can't share how much you make. They get very upset if you do, because then you find out that you are you are getting paid less for the exact same job. And that whole, it's like a society of secrets. And if it wasn't so, we might actually be able to clarify whether or not it's still a problem. But I think it still is true because they keep it such a secret. So
absolutely. And so why would it be necessary to keep it a secret? That's a question we immediately have to ask ourselves. And the second issue is there's nothing illegal about sharing what you make in a corporation with another person. Even though they will tell you it might be against the policy, you're not breaking the law.
Right.
Okay. And the next thing I want to share, if you as an individual go into a corporation and ask, is there pay equity in existence at this corporation? And you get a positive affirmative response and yes, and then found out that it's not, you immediately have a lawsuit because that's discrimination. So that's another part of the reason why this quote unquote veil of secrecy is over how much one individual versus another makes. Okay. But thank you for chiming in there. I really appreciate that. Thank you for starting the conversation. All right. Okay. Here's a video I want to share because I use those 4 elements of our identity: race, religion, age. Okay. Because I wanted to delve just a little deeper in this issue called privilege. I have to spend quite a significant amount of time when I'm in person on this particular issue because many people still do not believe that they inherit particular privileges based on their identity. Sometimes I begin the conversation as liking it to being born and just hitting the multi-billion-dollar lottery. If you were born as this, you're most likely to get that. If you were born looking like this, you can scratch it. If you were born having one of these, you can run some things. You got me? Privileges, what are they? Okay? Nothing you did allowed you to come into this planet and say that I'm in a position where I should be treated better than someone else. Absolutely nothing. Conversely, where I should be treated worse than someone else. So there are a lot of privileges associated with our identifiers. Some people, again, have great bit of pushback because many people hear privilege as, I didn't work hard for what I got. And that's not what the topic is. It's privileges. I can go to any state in the United States or any store in the union and find hair care products for people with hair like mine. Trust me, I can't say that, okay? I can go to any state in the union and find food to my culture. And trust me, I can't say that. I can walk down the street, any place, anytime, any now, and feel safe, okay? As a man, I might be able to say that. As a woman, you would be fooling yourself, okay? Does not have the same role based on some of those identifiers. And some of those things are simply under the umbrella of privileges. I don't want to reduce anybody's privileges, but I want to come to a place where privileges are acknowledged and we can interact in a way where we realize that someone has a leg up on someone else, and how do we mitigate that? How do we address that? Okay, here's a video. Privilege.
Some people are born into families where they have to walk miles just to get water. All I have to do is turn on a faucet. That's privilege.
I think privilege is when some people have some things and other people don't have things.
I feel privilege is something that you don't even really have control over.
I think it'd be silly for me to say I don't have a fair amount of privilege, considering like the country I live in and the job I get to do and the college I was allowed to go to.
I suppose being a white male will help me end up somewhere towards the front, but I'll take a few steps back from being gay.
I don't think I'll make it to the front. I think I'll maybe be in the middle. That's just the gut feeling I have.
If your parents work nights and weekends to support your family, take one step back. If you can show affection for your romantic partner in public without fear of ridicule or violence, take one step forward. If you were embarrassed about your clothes or house while growing up, take one step back. If you have ever been diagnosed as having a physical or mental illness or disability, take one step back. If you have ever been bullied or made fun of based on something you can't change, take one step back. If you get time off for your religious holidays, take one step forward. If you came from a supportive family environment, if you can see a doctor whenever you feel the need, if you are able to move through the world without fear of sexual assault, if you took out loans for your education, if there were more than 50 books in your house growing up. So these are your final positions.
I think it felt kind of strange for everyone.
It's a hard thing to discuss or even reflect on. It was very awkward.
I think when you can represent it so visually like this and so immediately, it definitely takes on a new form.
I think we were like all joking around in the beginning. It was pretty lighthearted, and as soon as the questions started coming in, the mood shifted immediately, and we all it was just silent.
Just looking back and seeing like a bunch of people behind you is not a good feeling.
It's like weird how you want to like hold on to explaining a certain privilege, like, oh, but that's not actually me because like I had to work really hard for that. So it's weird to like take a step forward when you feel like you're taking a step forward with someone else, but you wear a lot of the baggage of like how those things were hard.
It was like more emotional than I thought it would be.
It reminded me of when they talk about slavery in high school and you feel like angry for a few days, but then you just realize like, this is how it is.
For me, it was kind of frustrating almost to look back and see how much further some people were behind me, and realizing that, you know, a lot of that stuff, no amount of hard work or even legislation can make up that gap.
It's interesting being an Asian American because you're not really sure where you fall on the spectrum of privilege.
I know that for me, one of the reasons I ended up so far back was that there are questions around safety as an African American, as a woman, as a gay woman. There are just so many different ways that I don't feel safe.
I feel like I just learned to be grateful for what you have. You know, we're in such a huge society where it's always complaining about what you don't have.
It just shows you that for some families, like each family, you're meant to do better. My grandparents did good, my parents did good, and I'll do even better.
I do think if you're not like aware of privilege, you should do this exercise, but it's more complicated.
Privilege. That's one of the difference that difference makes. Personally, in my consultancy, I no longer conduct that particular activity, though many organizations and individuals do. And I don't conduct it because of the absolute pain that it brings to the folks who end up being in the back and in the rear, as well as the pain of awareness that it can bring for the folks who are in the front. It's difficult to process that. I have other ways by which bringing people to a heightened degree of awareness of privilege can be brought about. Matter of fact, I have several activities that do that. But again, that particular one I don't do. And I would advise anyone who did not have the skill set in managing the issues, including the emotions that crop up as a result of doing something like that, not to kind of try that one at home, as they say. But privilege is one of the differences that difference makes. Again, I'm back to this puzzle nomenclature, because that red thing in the middle, that piece is identifying privilege. I have a whole list of privileges that sometimes people aren't aware of. I am sometimes reticent to use sports analogies, but we're in a tennis environment. So one of the sports-based analogy as it relates to privilege that I sometimes use is that some people, based on the narrative, policies, procedures that happen in our society, believe that they are playing baseball and they just hit a triple, when actuality, they were already born on third base. It's a hard realization to come to, especially when you're bereft of the knowledge and sometimes the will to do anything about it, because there are things that can be done, again, without damaging the privileged individual. But sometimes there's just not a sense of urgency to do that, for risk of you might lose 1, 2, or 3 of those privileges. So again, privilege is one of the difference that difference makes.
Dana, can I share something?
You sure can. Would you please? Who am I speaking with?
Yes, Eugene.
Yes, Eugene, would you go ahead?
It never dawned on me until I was reviewing the Georgia driver, I think defensive driving test for my daughter. And I came across a question, a true or false question that says, to drive in the US, is it a privilege or a right?
Oh.
And then, of course, I had to reflect on it. And I said, it's a privilege. First, you have to own a car, which is a right. You have the right to own a car, but it's not a right to drive. You have to get tested and go through all the requirements and meet them before you're allowed. And that's how this privilege thing hit me, and I reflected on it. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that. And I know we're getting close to the end, so I must comment on the responses that I've gotten from this entire group over these 2-session period, including yours. That's what makes the interaction rich, meaningful, and putting us each and every one, if we choose to, in a place to be better, to make a difference, and create an environment, whatever your environment is, more inclusive and accepting of whomever, based on whatever identity. So thank you for sharing that personal story. Another short video, one prize-winning short story, and I entitled it Just Us Two.
Everyone has heard stories of friendships, but no one has heard a story quite like this one. Emily and Sam didn't know each other that well, but Emily made sure to express her feelings.
are you okay? Do you need any help? Is there someone I could call? How badly are you hurt? You're bored.
Emily was embarrassed, but she was mostly disappointed that she saw Sam's true colors since he didn't help her up. But there was much more than she thought. Emily and Sam knew that they were different, but that didn't matter. They only cared about what was on the inside, not the outside.
I think that video brings about a major point in terms of who we are and who we can be to each other. Even though it's entitled Differences, I counted the title to mean just us two, as in it's going to take more than just one type, kind, and background of individuals to bring equity about. We have to have this conversation amongst our differences, as well as between our differences. Thank you for your time today. I really appreciate the attention, the commentaries, and the outstanding opportunity to have this conversation with all of you. Have a wonderful day, and thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dana.
Bye-bye.
Everybody,
Thank you very
we'll
much.
See you
Thank
next
you.
Wednesday, the
See you
28th
next
at noon.
Yes.
And everyone have a great week. Take care.
I'll be
You
there.
too, Michael.
Bye, Michael.
Goodbye.
Thank you.